Hello and welcome. This is Scott Cook again with another episode of the Long-Term Space Program. In this episode, we've got a lot to do. We've got a Kethane platform in orbit that needs to come down. I've got a lot of orbital maneuvers to do. And yeah, we're going to get started with getting a station built in the Moon. But let's get started here. I was actually going to move some crew around. I wanted to get Jebediah a better assignment than actually just sitting at the space station here. So I figured he is a pilot, he should be a pilot. So, the first bit, I've decided to move a few guys around. Now, I haven't done a lot of EVAs in Kerbal Space Program before, so I'm still getting familiar with it. As you can see here, just trying to get that ladder centered, and for some reason my camera didn't line up right behind my Kerbal, so it made things a little bit more challenging. And grabbed it. That one actually looked professional. Alright, so I'm going to get, I think it's Newcott out of the tug here. He's going to be sitting in the station waiting pickup because I'm going to send a few of these Kerbals back. I'm going to give Jeb the tug because he's going to be using it to pull pieces of the moon station out to it shortly once I launch it here. Now I went and I said that it looked like I hadn't done this much before, and as you can see, the first time it actually looked pretty good, but this one is pretty obvious I'm bad. I bonked his head against the fuel or the engine there. Then I pretty much thrusting in the wrong direction, and Newcott's like panicking. Oh god, where am I going to go? I'm lucky I didn't hit any of my solar panels. Anyway, I get her back under control and start flying her back to the space station and back to the ladder so that he can get himself a crew tank and not have to worry about flying off into space. Speaking of which, that movie Gravity's out this Friday, which is supposed to have some pretty neat zero-G scenes in it with Sandra Bullock. I'm going to go see it probably this weekend with a friend of mine. Now, my ladder works fairly well on this, but as you can see, I had to massage it a bit. That's because it's actually two ladders, and let's go with a ladder again. Whoops. Anyway, with those ladders, it's actually two pieces, and because they're butted together, they got to kind of finesse it a little bit just to get them in there. Anyways, so Newcott's back in base. And next, we're going to get Big Jeb, hero of the Kerbin fleet. The man, the legend. He is male, right? Kerbins are all male, or are they female? Or are they neither? Anyway, I'll let you guys worry about that. So I'm just trying to get him down that ladder, and unfortunately that little bug kind of prevented me, so I just decided to use his pack, jump off the ladder, and EVA it. And as I'm flying over to the tug, I'm kind of worried a little bit here that I might have put the Baran arm right on the crew access point of that cockpit. So I'm just going to fly in there as carefully as I can to try to grab it. Fortunately, I was able to get back into the cab with a little finesse and just trying to find that sweet spot. Alrighty. Come on, Jeb, you can do it, man. And Jeb's a pilot. He should be flying anyway. Alright, there we go. We got it. Now, I was also going to take one Kerbin out of the truck because you don't really need three guys to fly that. So I decided to go through their portraits and decide which one was panicking the most and then give them a nice, cushy, scientific desk job at the space station here. Kerbins need to do all kinds of sciencey stuff after all, take a look and make sure Kerbin's still around, count the stars. I don't know. There's got to be something scientific he can do. So we're just using his pack here to come in and actually try it again to make it look like I sort of knew what I was doing, which ended up working out okay. You get better as you try these things, right? So we'll just find him a nice empty crew cab here. There it is. And we'll just move him down the ladder. I do like how that ladder worked out. Again, just because I butted two together, there's a little bit of bug, but you can usually work around it. And there, boarded. He's on board now. Great. Now, we've got to decouple. We're going to set Jeb out into an orbit here, and we're going to send him to go pick up some stuff. If I'm not mistaken, he's going to go pick up the gas tank that I launched into Kerbin orbit the last episode. And he's out. Pulling out. Jeb's probably just so happy. He's got that huge grin. For some reason, the portrait in the bottom corner didn't come in when we started this flight, but that's okay. So we just pull away from the station carefully using RCS. I don't want to risk damaging anything on the station or the other ship that's docked there. And then we just got to find the gas tank. And I'm going to use the MechJeb rendezvous option there just because it speeds up my process here. Alrighty. So just looking for the gas tank, there it is, and we've got it locked. I'm pretty close orbit, so we'll just move ahead here. Now I'm coming in close to it. I skipped ahead a bit just to, again, avoid unnecessary maneuvers. Coming in on the gas station, looks good. I need to clear up a spot, but then I realized something. We just lost solar power. We're ducked behind the dark side of the planet. And I'm like going, oh, nuts. I just missed it because I lost all power in my gas can and I can't maneuver it and I can't do anything with it other than just watch it. So I decided to speed ahead here and come around the planet until I could get some juice back, which, because my tug was in a close enough orbit, it didn't get too far away, which was good. Now we're just going to decouple this RCS thing and I'm just going to deorbit it quickly because you guys all know I don't like Kessler syndrome. There. When the camera changes, I'm pretty sure you've got an orbit that goes into the planet, so we just use the RCS, burn what little bit's there, and then I switch back to the tug to go pick it up. I gotta be careful because I designed the gas can so that when you decouple both ends, you no longer have any probe bodies attached to it. Therefore, the game treats it as debris. So I have to dock the tug on it before I decouple the other end. And it's also going to be the same when I get it out to the moon, because I'm going to decouple the dead engine that's on it, deorbit it, and then the tug's going to basically be the command module, so it's got to stay attached to the gas station before I attach the other piece to it, the docking collar, which has the control module in it. It's a way to kind of keep, again, part count down. You don't really need two brains in it. And the probe bodies constantly consume electricity, which isn't really necessary when you've got a manned mission. Well, the cockpits that have Kerbals in them don't draw any electricity unless you're actually doing maneuvers or, using lights or that kind of thing. Alright, so again, just transitioning closer for the dock, just to kind of get things motoring ahead a little bit faster here. Jeb's all raring to go here. He's coming in straight, he's coming in a little hot, but he knows what he's doing, so I'll just leave him to it. Once he gets the gas can here, we're going to head it out to the moon. I've also got the truck, or the other spaceship at the space station, the big rig. It's going to grab the docking collar and haul it out. Once there, they're both going to get assembled and basically start hauling resources back to Kerbin for other launches. Just looking here, you can see that Jeb's coming in. He's just about to finish the dock. He's real close now. Nice and straight. Bang. No wiggle, no wobble. He knows exactly what he's doing. We'll pull in those sails. We'll just leave a little bit of fuel in that last stage on the back of the can to deorbit it. But looking forward here, once we're done the moon station, we're going to start planning a Joule mission, because if you look in the top corner, you can see my next window for transfer is Joule. Now, Joule's got an interesting set of satellites around it. It's got 5 moons, and it's a huge gravity well, so it should be relatively easy to get captured in it. The trick is I've got to find ways of extracting Kethane. Now, I was debating it, and this is very preliminary, early stage kind of thought, but I'm definitely going to have to send several probes out there. And, eventually I want a space station, but we'll get more into that later. Switching to the moon here, I just followed the satellite for a few minutes while I was waiting for another transfer to finish. Just getting the Kethane platform here coming up on its periaps, so that I just had to circularize the orbit around the moon here. And then it would need a refill of gas in order to actually land it, because it's a fairly heavy vehicle, as you can tell, lots of mass. It needs a fair bit of delta V to do any kind of serious maneuvering. So, coming on here, I'm just going to line up with the maneuver node, and then we're going to hit the burners just to slow her down and get a fairly circular orbit. Around 15 kilometers is what I think I was aiming for. Now, landing stuff this big on the moon isn't too bad. I mean, it's fairly reasonable to be able to launch something from Kerbin and get it to the moon. It's one of the simplest things in the game. So, getting big structures out here isn't too bad. Fairly easy and a lot of fun, in my opinion. But when we start getting out to some of the bigger, or excuse me, not the bigger, but some of the further planet systems like Eve, Duna, Joule, setting up huge stations like this is not very practical, if even possible in some cases. What I'm planning to do is have a space station and then just one vehicle that will land, extract the Kethane fuel, and haul it back to the space station, rather than having several vehicles that will do that job but do it much faster. Like for the moon here, what's going to happen is this is the first base. It's the first permanent installation. I'll launch more crap to the moon as we need it, but this thing is going to land. It's going to refill the sky crane. Now, it's going to cross paths with the Kethane rig here, the ship that you used to basically lead the whole mission. It's full of stuff, full of fuel to refill this thing with. So I'm just waiting for it to get roughly overhead, and then I'm going to start chasing it. Now, launching from the moon is easy. You don't need a hell of a lot of delta V. And once you get a few meters off the ground, you pretty much want to start your gravity turn to make your orbit. It's probably one of the best ways to do it to save fuel. In this case, I'm actually catching something, so I'm going to be working my directional vector here to match up with the pink crosshairs as I can. If you're looking at my nav ball right now, you notice that it's still targeting the actual station itself. So therefore, it's showing me where my retrograde is in proximity to the target. In this case, I will switch it here shortly, but I basically want my prograde vector to line up with the crosshairs to catch up to it. There we go, that's a little bit better. As you can see, my orbit's starting to match its orbit and then once I get a stable orbit around the moon, I'll actually do a proper rendezvous. Okay, so once we get that all taken care of, the platform, I'm going to have to find a location to land it. Now, the flatter the better, obviously, but we are dealing with a celestial body that has a lot of craters, so we're going to have to do a little bit of exploration to see if we can find an ideal location. The other thing is, in this game, Kethane's not a permanent resource. I can mine it all out if I'm not careful, or if I just want to, really. And that means that this station is going to have a shelf life. At some point, it's going to use up all the Kethane that's in the moon. I'm hoping it'll last a long time, because the Kethane deposit that we end up putting it on has got a fairly significant amount. Probably the highest that I've seen on the moon in any one deposit. And therefore, should last us a fair amount of time, especially if I'm relatively cheap with maneuvers. The only thing that's really going to cost me a great deal is using heavy vehicles and inefficient engines. Alright, so we've got ourselves targeted. I'm going to set up MechJeb to do the rendezvous and catch it. Sweet. Now, I'm just going to have to dock to the front of this thing. Give it some fuel, open her up. Just going to use the station itself to rotate it around to face the Kethane rig, as you can see behind it. Getting the platform out there is probably going to be the most challenging, because it needed 2 refills just to get to the point where I could actually land it. And that's strictly due to the mass and the efficiency of the engines. It's a big thing. Now, those big tanks on the outside are empty, but they still weigh a fair bit even when dry. And I've also got to be careful with this too, because I got to leave enough fuel in my Kethane rig, the ship, to send it back down. I've also got to make sure I balance the fuel in the Kethane platform, because if you notice, it's got a lot of radial tanks, and if you get those off balance and thrust, it's going to start to want to turn. So my solution to that, well, was actually in the design of the Kethane platform. You can't really see it right now, but I'll point it out later when it's more obvious. But when you're dealing with Kethane, you can actually use fuel lines to distribute the fuel. The trick is they have to be backwards or counterintuitive. With the fuel line standard in Kerbal Space Program, you want your source tank to feed into your destination tank. So you want radial tanks feeding into the center, which then feeds an engine underneath it or something to that effect. With Kethane, it's counterintuitive. You want your tank that's getting fed the fuel from the Kethane module to be going out to the empty tanks on the outside. And that works because the Kethane mod was designed so that when you're actually producing fuel, it eats negative space or empty space. And just with the way the programming is, it works. And that's actually kind of a neat trick that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of. But if you look at the way the Kethane platform is right now, you see there's a little small gas tank in there. I'll actually show it to you a little bit more later when we get a better view. But there's a small tank on the inside that the Kethane converter feeds into, and then from there there's fuel lines that go out to the radial tanks, those great big ones that are from KW Rocketry. Success! We have docking. Now the nice thing about this is a Kethane platform, so I can just feed it full of Kethane and let it do its own processing. And because I set up the fuel lines to work like I was explaining before, it will distribute the processed Kethane, the fuel, and the oxidizer that comes out of it evenly amongst those exterior tanks. I think I'll show it to you here later, or maybe not. In any case, I skipped ahead just because it's a lot of fuel transfers and it took a fair amount of time just to get things sorted out. Backing off the Kethane rig here, and it's actually going to go back to the surface to look for a landing spot. I found a couple that were okay, but I wanted to do a little bit more of exploration. If you look in the top right corner, you see I've only got like 400 fuel and oxidizer, but I turn on my Kethane converter so that it starts feeding fuel straight into the center tank, because if I start feeding the external tanks, so the tanks that are got the engines actually mounted to them, it will get off balance real quick. It's really, really hard to equalize without some kind of a pre-measure. So the key thing basically is I drain the middle tank, which is a very small tank. It will get filled by the Kethane, and it turns out to be more than adequate to get this vehicle back to where it needs to go. Alright, now that we've got our landing zone picked out, I'm just going to let MechJeb land it here. I still got to bring out more vehicles yet. I need a vehicle that's going to haul fuel from the surface to the space station. I'm also going to need a vehicle to be as a go-between, a truck or a rover of some sort. The reason for that is it's too hard to pick landing spots that are close enough that those burn arms are going to work. I'm going to need something to kind of be as a go-between. So I was hoping to get some of that into this video, but I actually played ahead. I got a lot more footage to edit here and see what I've got. But I've got a truck coming. I've got a lunar lander that's going to come and start basically getting the process going here so that I can start actually refilling the space stations instead of just using what they have available currently. First things first though, let's check this landing spot, see what it's like, if it's any good. Maybe do a little bit of EVAing, running around, let the Kerbals stretch their legs a bit. I gotta make sure I pick a good spot or it's gonna complicate things going forward significantly. Alright, coming in for a final landing here. I'm looking at this spot going, uh-oh, this ain't good. If you look in the background, you can see there's a lot of mountainous, a lot of craters. I'm starting to think this is a bad spot. In fact, I'm pretty much sure at this point this isn't where the platform's going to go. But I am hoping that the spot I picked is well enough that I can land my vehicle to refill it, because there isn't enough fuel in it to do this again. Coming in though, my fears were abated a little bit here. We got a slope. It's not a great slope, but again, keeping in mind you design your vehicles to be bottom heavy and with wide bases, slopes are handled a little bit easier, as you can see here. I'm coming in, you can see my shadow, kind of giving you an idea of how close to the surface I am. Now this is a pretty steep grade, like you probably wouldn't want to land too much on this. It's doable, but it's getting close to the threshold where it'd be bad. Come in, again, I gotta stress that guys, if you're building landers, make them as bottom heavy as possible. It just saves you grief. We hit Kethane, I can start refilling this vehicle. Now while it's filling with fuel, I was thinking maybe I should just do an EVA with my guys, see if I can get more of a scope of the land, see if there's some place I can put the Kethane platform. Just deciding here, and bang, he's coming out. Landed right between the drills. Safety first, guys, good job. Well, you guys remember what I said at the beginning of the episode when I was rocketing guys around that I'm not very good with it? Well, that becomes pretty obvious here. This becomes less rocketing and more a controlled skid. I'm skidding around the moon. His helmet makes a great braking apparatus, I'm sure. And those scratches will probably help him see better in space, you know. Parabolic lenses. I left this in here just because it's so bad. God, I suck at this. I'm going to have to spend some time getting better at this, but we'll go as we go here. I'm trying to get over this crest here to see if I can see something, and just looking around, and I'm thinking, yeah, base not going to work here. And one more skid. Well, time to turn around, I think. I've seen enough of what I can see up here, so we get going. Nice thing about having the Kethane rig loaded this whole time is that it's filling itself even while I'm away from it. So that's good. And we're coming in. I'm coming in pretty fast. I'm like, I'm getting the hang of this now. I got this. Oh, this looks... Oh. Bad. Oh, that gotta hurt. Oh, ow. Ooh. That actually looks a lot more painful than I thought the first time. It just keeps going. As long as I can keep the scratch marks vertical on his helmet, he's got parabolic lenses, right, guys? Yeah, finally come to a stop and check everything. It's working. Looking at that valley, you could probably put something down there, but it's still pretty rough. And more skidding. More skidding. I should rename this to Skid Kerbin. Think that's funny? Yeah. If the developers are watching, you need a Kerbin named Skid. I think that'd be awesome. So coming in a little more reasonably this time, I don't want him to go flying past. Trying to get a little bit better at this, get a little more control of it. So bringing him down gently. He skidded a bit, but still not bad. I'll get this eventually. Don't worry. Poor guy. So we're going to get him back into the Kethane rig here. I'm going to have to start transferring some fuel around. The center tank in this one doesn't fill the external tanks because I have to set up the fuel line so that the center tank fills the external tanks during flight. And we're processing. We've got about 3,000 Kethane in the tank right now. Start transferring fuel around a bit. This will take a while, so I'm going to skip ahead a little here shortly. And there we go. We are full. Now I'm going to take off and I'm going to go check that other Kethane patch on the far side of the moon. Unfortunately, it's on the dark side, so you won't see too much. But while I was going to do it, I was just going to fly over the Kethane patch I'm on right now as low as I can safely, just to kind of do a low altitude survey. Maybe there is some place around here that I can use. But as I was going, this area just got craggier and craterier and more mountainous. It was just not conducive to a long-term establishment, unfortunately. I will eventually get the Kethane out of here. I might keep landing the Kethane rig here and just taking out a load at a time. Or in the future I may have some kind of platform I do take out of here anyway. It'll just depend on how things go down. Getting pretty close. As you can see, it says my apoapsy's at 6 kilometers on the one side there, but I'm actually only about, a kilometer or two maybe off the surface right now. Checking the map just to see if I'm still over top of the Kethane patch, because like right here might be okay for a platform or a drilling derrick of some kind. But again, it's so rough in places that if I hit the wrong spot with a big platform, it could dump itself over, start to roll. Basically all that effort for naught, really. And I'm getting out of the key patch on this side, so I decide to check my apoapsy, and I realized I kind of got a really high apoapsy with it because I really wasn't paying attention to my flight pattern. Ended up with a 65 kilometer apoapsy, and then coming down on the far side of the moon is a crash, so use a little bit of RCS to bring it down a bit. Still sort of surveying, but it really doesn't make much point because without any Kethane there's no real point to land here. We'll just get her down safely, and RCS is cheap, I don't have to flip it around. I actually use this to my advantage a little bit later because when I check where I'm going to land, you can see I'm fairly close to that other patch I want to check on, so I'll just do a slight corrective burn on the when I get to the apoapse, and then I will come in for a landing over there. Just speeding ahead here a little bit. You can see the Kethane platform coming underneath me here. I'm getting close to my apoapse, and I'm going to just circularize my orbit just a hair so that I can come in on a safe landing trajectory. I'm actually going retrograde with this orbit. The Kethane ship is going counterclockwise around the moon, as opposed to most other ships that I've brought in, which are going prograde. Basically, retrograde is against the rotation of the moon. Like the moon rotates one way, and retrograde means I'm going the other way. And prograde is with the moon. In most cases, prograde is generally used more often. It allows for a little bit easier transfer of energy. But retrograde can sometimes have its uses. In this case, it was shorter for me to go retrograde. So I just went backwards. And we're just coming in here, letting MechJeb line up my landing coordinates. Again, I'm trying to find a spot to put down the Kethane platform. I'm going to let MechJeb handle the landing because I'm doing it on the night side of the moon right now. The rotation of the moon can take a great deal of time. I think it rotates slower than Kerbin, so one day actually takes more time to come around. That being said, I wanted to keep things moving forward here. Now, if without the aid of things like MechJeb or the Kerbal Engineer program, it'd be really hard to determine where the current land level is. The altimeter at the top there actually counts down to sea level, but that could be somewhat deceptive because your actual point to where your land is could be higher or lower. So therefore it's not an accurate gauge for landing. That's why when you do it manually. You want to do it on the light side of the moon, and you actually want to do it at dawn or dusk on the moon so that you can get a good glimpse of where your shadow is, because that actually is a better indication as to how high off the ground you are. In a moment here, I'm going to switch to the surface indicator on my Kerbal Engineer, and it'll actually give you an indication as to where the real land level is. In this case, I'm actually about 2,000. Current land is about 2,000 higher than sea level. If you can see on the right hand side there, altitude terrain is my real height. Basically, when that hits 0, I'm going to be hitting land. So we're about 100 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters, and landing. And as I'm coming in, my lights are reflecting off the surface going, oh crap, another grade. So we've got a huge grade on this one. Again, bottom heavy crafts, you just can't beat it because it doesn't tip over, barely even tilts. But this is still good enough. I can get a little bit more Kethane here. I can get an idea of where to go, play a little hopscotch with stuff, do a little EVA, and try to figure out where I'm going to put my Kethane platform. And here we go again, more rocket pack stuff. Alrighty. Now again, I'm doing this on the night side, so this sucks. I really can't see anything. I was hoping I could, get something out there. I ended up turning on his helmet camera or his helmet light here in a moment. I paused it to find out how. I moved ahead forward here just a little bit. I did a bunch of surveying, but it was kind of futile. And rather than see me do a whole bunch of more controlled skids with our brave Kerbal astronauts here, I felt it was just going to skip ahead a little bit. Trying to get him back into the Kethane rig here. We're going to play a little hopscotch with it, see if I can find a safe landing zone. But I'm not going to show a whole bunch of that because it ended up being a lot of just hopping the ship around, getting it about, a couple thousand meters above the ground, and then landing again. Taking a few minutes to survey it and decide if that was where the platform was going to go. In the interest of keeping the video relatively within time constraints, I decided that was a bit of a waste of time to show. Alright, so on the platform here, we're just going to pick a landing spot. I'm using the rig as the target location. Even so, it's going to be very difficult to land things close to each other on the moon here. It's, what seems like right on target here is going to actually end up translating into several meters in either direction. Plus there's a little bit of give and take because nothing's perfect. So we're going to just rotate the platform to do an inclination change, I believe. Yep, we got to do a slight inclination change in order to make sure the orbit crosses the landing zone. That basically means burning toward the poles. Just doing it quickly to slightly adjust orbit, leveling it out, making sure that it crosses the landing zone. Speeding ahead a bit here till we get to the point where I rotate the platform to face retrograde and start to kill our orbital velocity. As you can see, there's a little bit of wiggle in here, so it has to take a fair amount of time to get sorted out and burns a lot of RCS fuel just to keep it straight. That's fine though. So once this platform's on the ground, I'm going to detach the sky crane. Once it's been refilled with Kethane, or with fuel from the Kethane process, it'll find its home in the space station that's going to be orbiting the moon. I'll use it because I've got several large loads to drop. I'm going to have to drop a truck of some kind. I'm going to have to drop a few other things. I haven't decided yet. I'll probably put some home modules up there too, just to make sure the kerbins have some place to live, so that they're not all cooped up in small cans all the time. After all, we're going to try to make this as habitable as possible. Alright, so we're just killing our... we're just coming in here safely, reasonably, opening the platform. The spot I picked out wasn't perfect, but it's going to do. As you can see, there's the Kethane rig underneath it. And landing legs are down. Sweet. Again, this always makes me nervous whenever we do this kind of stuff, because landing is always tricky, no matter what. And coming in a safe 0.5 meters a second, and down. Bit of a grade there, but it's not too bad, and I mean the whole area's these lazy grades, so it'll do for now. Start pulling out the drills just to make sure everything works. I really need to hotkey that stuff, but as you can see, it's starting to pull out the green smoke, starting to fill kethane in the tanks, start to convert it. And if you guys remember what I mentioned about the fuel lines, if you put them backwards or counterintuitive, they actually fill the external tanks first when using Kethane mod. With that, I'm going to call it an episode. Next episode, I've got some other stuff to do. I did mention I had an SSTO that I have to get up, and I've got a space truck to land, and a few other things I got to do. So stay tuned. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please feel free to let me know. This is Scott Cook saying have a good evening and see you in the verse. Goodbye.